To the Greeks, Demeter and Persephone became symbols of the seasons of nature. When Persephone was above the earth, it was said that Demeter blessed the land with the fruits of spring, summer, and fall. But when Persephone was in the underworld, the earth suffered a cold and barren winter. This cave is where many Greeks believed Persephone emerged from the underworld. The Eleusinian cult began here in Eleusis, where Persephone was said to have been abducted. The Eleusinian Mysteries was a secret cult, but one in which anyone could be initiated. Ancient Greek poetry and artwork provide a window of knowledge about this mysterious religion. Each fall during harvest time, people made a pilgrimage to Athens from all over Greece to participate in a festival, to ask Demeter for abundant harvest and for information about what would happen to them after death. The festival opened with a herald announcing that anyone whose hands were free of pollution, meaning they hadn't committed murder or any other blood crime, could step forth as a candidate for initiation into the cult of Demeter. The initiates were required to bring a sacrificial piglet, which they first carried down to the sea to cleanse and purify. Then they would fall into a solemn procession, often of over 15,000 people, walking from Athens to Eleusis. Once they arrived, the piglets were thrown into large pits as gifts to the goddess. Modern archaeologists have unearthed these ancient pits, as well as votive offerings, that shed some light on the public rituals of the Eleusinian Mysteries. But what about the private initiation ceremonies? According to ancient inscriptions, every member who was initiated was sworn to keep secret whatever he or she had seen or heard during the rituals. One initiate into the cult later wrote, "The dream forbids me to write what lies inside the sanctuary wall, and what the initiates are not allowed to see, they obviously ought not to know about."
The secrecy was taken so seriously that once 2 Argive teenagers were caught spying on the rituals, and death was the result. They were punished with death because it was not proper for them to see these events that were forbidden to people who were not initiates.
Somewhere in this field of silent stones is where some historians believe a large fortress was built to conceal the ceremonies. One theory about the Eleusinian Mysteries suggests that initiates were given an hallucinogenic drug derived from buds found on sheaths of wheat, the symbol of Demeter.
One of the most popular cults in antiquity. It went on a long time, and it was one of the big rivals to Christianity because the Christians were very concerned to discredit it as far as possible, so it must have been a big competition for them.
Demeter was not the only divinity who was honored with a mystery cult. Greek women, whose lives were often consumed with domestic drudgery, sometimes became involved in the orgiastic cult of Dionysus, the god of wine. Dionysus was born of an affair between Zeus and his mortal lover, Semele. However, the pregnant Semele was killed in a plot orchestrated by Zeus's jealous wife, Hera. It was said that Zeus later rescued his unborn son from Semele's womb and sewed him into his thigh. When the time was right, it was said that Dionysus ripped through the stitches and was therefore twice born. Since his birth was the result of a love affair that ended in death, Dionysus became the god of ecstasy. The cult dedicated to Dionysus spread like wildfire. In the wilderness of ancient Greece, it was said that Dionysus intoxicated his female followers with wine and song. They were then transformed into enraptured dancers, floating in a trance-like state of euphoria.
They describe a kind of ecstasy of being able to get out of themselves, and I think that is part of what that cult is. You are able to get away from your work, you're able to get away from whatever the normal confines of life are, and go into the mountains or go into the woods and have a good time, at least for a day or two. That's part of that religion, and I think that made it so exciting.
It was said that Dionysus also had a dark side. He could lure his cult members into bliss or murderous deeds. At times, his female worshippers would be induced into such a frenzied state that they would slay animals and rip small children into pieces so they could eat the flesh and drink the blood. Men were warned to stay far away from these women when they were possessed by the god. Yet the worship of Dionysus was a sort of safety valve for women narrowly restricted in ancient life. These are the remains of the Theater of Dionysus, located in Athens. Here are stone seats bearing the names of the priests who were chosen as caretakers of the shrine. But all that remains from the stage are headless sculptures which symbolize the legend of Dionysus. He was said to have brought light and heat to the earth. His cult following was larger than any other. His name, Apollo, god of light, music, and prophecy. Apollo was the second generation of Olympian gods, the son of Zeus and the goddess Leto. He was born on the island of Delos with his twin sister Artemis, goddess of wildlife. The handsome Apollo was the epitome of youth. His powers were said to be awesome. Every morning he mounted his chariot and rode across the sky like a fiery ball, providing energy and light to the world. But like most of the Olympian gods, Apollo possessed evil traits as well. At times he was the deliverer of plagues and darkness. And according to the writer Homer, Apollo once descended from the heavens, shooting his arrows into both animals and men.
Another interesting aspect of the Greek gods is that they do not seem to be intrinsically good or evil. They didn't start out being good or evil forces, but rather a mixture, the way human beings are a mixture, with different kinds of impulses.
The god of light did have a weakness for nymphs, goddesses, and mortal maidens. At one time, he fell hopelessly in love with a nymph named Daphne, who was incapable of returning his affections. It was said that Apollo chased Daphne through the woods. The beautiful nymph quickly transformed into a laurel tree. When Apollo approached the graceful branches of the tree, he proclaimed that if he couldn't have Daphne as his wife, he would make the laurel tree sacred. And so the laurel wreath became the symbolic prize that Greeks awarded at the Olympic Games. Apollo was not only known for his sexual conquests, but also for his ability to perform amazing feats. In the city of Delphi, Apollo was said to have slain a fearsome python with his arrows. The peasants in the area rejoiced at the death of the snake by making Delphi a sanctuary for Apollo. Since he was known to possess the gift of prophecy, ancient Greeks claimed that Apollo's oracle existed at Delphi. By the 8th century BC, it became an international sanctuary, and pilgrims traveled there to make an offering and ask advice. They stood in line to talk to the Pythia, a priestess who was usually a local village woman. She was said to possess the gift of prophecy and served as the interpreter of the oracle. The priestess would go into a trance-like state by chewing laurel leaves or inhaling vapors from a nearby fissure, said to be the navel of the earth. The priestess would then babble incoherently, and a male priest would translate her message. Typically, Greeks would ask the oracle if a battle should be fought, or if they should marry, or where they could find a lost child. Individual cities in Greece eventually pitched in to build an ornate temple to Apollo, although many ancient Greeks believed that Apollo himself built his first shrine out of laurel branches. On the roof of this crumbling columned wonder were once inscribed Apollo's words of wisdom, such as "nothing in excess" and "know thyself." Today, little remains of this sanctuary except its majestic setting. While Apollo was worshipped for his oracle, his son Asclepius offered the ancient Greeks one of the greatest gifts known to man, the gift of healing. Figures like Asclepius, whose father was a god and mother was a mortal, were labeled heroes. Many Greeks believed the gods elevated his status to that of a god because of his extraordinary healing powers.